Welcome to QX Church. You find us online at qxchurch.org. I am Pastor Scott Conway with Think on These Things, lesson number 2. Think on these things. This is Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. True, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, virtue, praise. Think on these things. And we broke out what think means, and we kind of dove deep just into that word, logizomai. And there's a whole bunch of aspects to that particular Greek word for think. Today we're going to look at just this very first part. Whatsoever things are true. Whatsoever things are true, alethes, true, truly, truth, a loving truth. Now that's an interesting little addition there. Speaking truth, truthful. Now because whatsoever things are honest comes next, there's going to be a bit of an overlap between whatsoever things are true and whatsoever things are honest, because truth and honesty do have a direct relationship one to another. But let's take a look at this word for a little bit. True, truly, truth. Okay, what's true? What's truthful? Things that are true. Pretty straightforward, right? Speaking truth. Speaking truth, we would connect that probably with honesty, and so some of that we'll talk about more next time. And this interesting little snippet, a loving truth. So these might include a truth you would tell someone because you love them. A truth you would tell someone because you want the best for them, which is the fundamental definition of love. A truth you would tell someone because you want to be the best for them. And they may not want to hear this truth. But because you love them, you want the best for them. You want to be the best for them. And that you're willing to be that person who will tell them the truth. So imagine if I thought I was a great singer. And you're listening to me sing and you're thinking, like, you know, that's great. This guy has so much enthusiasm, but oh my gosh, my ears hurt. Somebody has to tell him. Somebody has to tell him he's just really not that good. And so that would be a possibility. Someone who loves me might be willing to be that person. Now, very often this is, even now in my relationship with my mother, you know, and when she knows it's not going to make a difference, she'll say, because I'm the mom. There's certain things that I have to say because I'm the mom. It doesn't matter if it makes any difference. If I don't say it, I'm not doing my job as the mom. And so, you know, she has to say certain things because she's the mom. It's almost like there's like a divine contract that says when I leave her house, she has to say, drive carefully. She knows that I drive carefully. She knows I've had all of like one accident in my entire 35-year driving career. But she still has to say, drive carefully. There's just some things just as the mom. And when she has certain thoughts and motherly thoughts, it doesn't matter how old I am. It doesn't matter how educated I am. It doesn't matter what my life experience is. Just that the mom has to speak into the life of her child. It's just part of the deal. Speaking of loving truth might include the truths that will lead ultimately to transcendent joy. Now, we make the distinction between pleasure. Pleasure is momentary. Pleasure has a beginning, middle, and end. Then there's happiness, which is a bit more pervasive. That pleasurable thing doesn't have to be going on right now at this moment for there to be happiness. And then joy is much bigger than that. Joy is grasping onto like eternal things. Joy is grasping onto the big rules, the principles upon which things work, so that even when things are bad, you can hang on to joy. And so speaking of loving truth might be talking about the higher principle level truths. One of the interesting loving truths a good friend of mine spoke is we were sitting around one day, not me and my friend, but me and my lady, and talking about a particularly serious problem that had just happened to us. And maybe some of it had been happening behind the scenes, but we just found out about it. So to us, it had just happened. And it was a very serious financial reversal. And my friend, when hearing about this, said to us, like, well, you always say it's only money. Now you have a chance to show us. Well, was that true? Yeah, I did always say that. I had a chance to model my stated principles. I say this is the rule. I say this is the principle. I say these are the priorities, these are the values. Now I get to model that. Now I get to show that I really mean what I've been teaching. And she was right. And she knew us well enough to know that if she comes from a centered, grounded place of love, she knows that we trust the relationship enough, we trust her love enough, that when she says such a thing, she's really coming from a good place. And she was right. She did, on the other hand, feel bad about the fact that the same day we're dealing with a massive financial reversal, that she got a brand new car and thought better of trying to show it to us. But we wanted to see it because, for us, that's it's abundance, it's blessing, coming so close. It's in the life of a very good friend. And so we got to enjoy her new car. So whatsoever things are true, alethes, true, truly truth, loving truth, speaking truth, and truthful. Now, truth as a concept, one would think it'd be pretty straightforward, right? Something's true or something's false. That's just it. It's either right or it's wrong. It's true or it's false. It's honesty or it's lying, and it's very clear. Truth, however, is strangely ambiguous. Sometimes surprisingly ambiguous. And that's why we have our number one principle. Reality is more important than anything we believe. Reality is more important than anything we believe comes with a built-in presumption. It's a built-in acknowledgement that if reality is more important than whatever we believe, that reality and what we believe may, from time to time, be at variance with one another. That what reality is may be at variance with what we believe reality is. We never know everything. There's always stuff we just don't know. We haven't learned it yet. We haven't seen it yet. We don't have a fullness and a depth of understanding. So there's always more truth to learn. Always. Now, even if everything we already know is true, our knowledge is incomplete. We are not omniscient. God is omniscient. We are not. There's always things we don't know. Also, and sometimes this is intellectually obvious, but emotionally sometimes it's a little less so. It is almost impossible. And the only reason I put the almost in there is that some people, frankly, know so few things that the few things they know might be true. I don't know. It is almost impossible that every single thing we know is exactly correct. Almost impossible. We will likely need to shift some of what we think we know as more information becomes available. And sometimes as simple a thing as things shift. So what is true right now might be a little bit different than what's going to be true tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Numbers change, trends change, what's popular changes, what we think is safe changes, what we realize is unsafe changes. The percentages of people in support of something or against something change. So even if everything we know right now were true, There's new information, changing information, and as information changes, that's part of the reality. And you know, I, as much as anyone else, we tend to fixate on however we first learned it. And if we didn't exactly learn it the way that we're going to go with it for the rest of our lives, very often we rebel against that and we go kind of the opposite way. And there's a tendency in human beings to kind of fixate there and for it to be a little hard to kind of pry people out. I have a friend right now that she's gone through a kind of a religious crisis in her particular religion. And she's kind of struggling with some of the things that she did when she was part of this particular religious group. And kind of how she feels she went overboard and kind of some damage that she felt she might have done. And kind of the rhetoric she kind of got caught up in. And she feels bad. And she's beginning to really reflect on that. And today, for the first time, I noticed that she's beginning to realize that maybe she still does some of that, but kind of in her new belief system. And she hasn't quite come to the realization of the part of what she's doing that is offensive to an entire class of people, where she could be talking about the exact same subject matter, but in a much less offensive way. But she's realizing what she had done before, which at least gives her the possibility, perhaps, of realizing what she's doing now. But reality is more important than anything we believe is a fundamental truth principle. We recognize we don't know all the truth. We don't know all of the reality. We don't have all of the facts. And so we will likely need to shift some of what we know. Now, this is also part of why we have a fundamental principle that derives from our core principle. And this is, I have a point. You may also have a point. So another part of the realization is that I may know what I believe. And I may know why I believe it. Now, sometimes I may not know exactly what I believe. And I may not know exactly why I believe it. Ideally, there'll be some logic, some consistency, some reason for it, and I just believe it. I just know that I know that I know. And I've heard people say that. That they just know that they know that they know. Well, okay, well, if you just know that you know that you know, and that should settle it, well, then I just know that I know that I know that I'm right and you're wrong, and that should settle it, right? And that's part of the all principles must be consistently applied. But the I have a point, I can know what my position is. And hopefully I have points to back up my position. There may be strong points, there may be weak points, there may be factual points, there may be more emotional points, there may be principle level points, there may be spiritual points, there may be from my personal experience, it may be from my observation, it may be from stories I have. Whatever it is, hopefully I have some support for my position. With that, I should also realize that people with differing views, differing beliefs, even contradictory beliefs, meaning that they contradict my beliefs, might also know what they believe, and they might also know why they believe it. They may also have points to back up their positions. They may also have some experience, some observations, some facts, some emotion, some principles. And that I need to be open to the fact that I may know that I have a point. And I may know my position and the reasons that back up my position. But that doesn't necessarily mean someone else has no point. Now, I don't want them dismissing me, so I don't dismiss them. Basic golden rule. I should listen to them just like I want them to listen to me. Basic golden rule. In marketing, they call it the law of reciprocity. That you go first, and then the other person, kind of in a social contract, kind of owes you. And they kind of have that felt sense that, well, you know, you listen to me, now it's my turn to listen to you. Now, does everybody do that? Of course not everybody does that. Some people, they just want to dominate the conversation because that's their temperament. But generally speaking, in most of society, and even when you have someone who wants to dominate, you can assert your turn. Say, look, I listened to you. I heard you out. Now it's your turn to hear me out. And even dominant personalities will tend to acknowledge that, okay, yeah, I owe you a turn. That doesn't mean they're really going to listen. But there's this fairness concept that we kind of get when we're young, that there's this thing called fair. And that if you've given to me, I really ought to give back. It's not quite transactional in that, well, I owe you. And so, you gave me 17 minutes, so now I have to give you 17 minutes. But it's just kind of that sense of not wanting to be unfair. And that we want kind of something that kind of resembles balance. So I do not presume that I'm always right, and that anyone who disagrees with me is always wrong, any more than someone else should presume that if we disagree, that therefore they're right and I'm wrong. And so I do golden rule. I don't want you to just assume I'm wrong because I disagree with you, so I don't just assume you're wrong because you disagree with me. Let me find out why you think what you think, and let's work from there. Now, something else when you're dealing with truth, pardon me. So something else when you're dealing with truth is it a fact or is it an opinion? Is it a fact or is it an interpretation of the facts? Facts are objectively true. Interpretations are what we think those facts mean. Factually, we may have, A, B, C. One person might look at those and go, oh, okay, well, what those facts mean is that somebody made a mistake. It means, we're all human. People, sometimes blow it. Sometimes we get fixated on stuff. Sometimes we just don't do everything right. And that's okay. Just, handle it. Some people might look at the exact same facts as A, B, C. Ha! Well, that means there's something wrong with you. What's wrong? You disrespected me. You don't love me. You're trying to sabotage me. You're trying to undermine me. You're trying to destroy our project. You're a bad person. Now, objectively, we still have A, B, C. We have the exact same facts. One person might look at A, B, C that involve, here's your assignment, and here's what you did, and here's what went wrong, and, that's a problem, but, hey, nobody's perfect. Just let's handle it. And they're pretty relaxed about it, or I guess the phrase now is they're pretty chill. Some people might get really bent out of shape and get really judgmental and judge who you are as a person, and they might kind of see it as, oh my gosh, this is going to destroy everything we're working on. And so there's interpretations, and there's facts, and the interpretation of the fact is not the fact. And so facts are the facts. Facts are objective. Interpretation of the facts are what we believe those facts mean. So is it a fact or is it an interpretation? Now also in this general category, we have opinions. Now opinions can just be an idea. I just have this idea. That's my opinion. That's what I think. I like it. I don't like it. May or may not have any support. So on something like an opinion of well, I like the color purple. Do I need any reference points to support me liking the color purple? Or is it okay for me to just like the color purple because I like the color purple? That's fine. Now, if you like someone or you don't like someone, you say, well, I don't really have a reason, I just don't like them. Is that okay? If you're acknowledging you don't have a reason, I think that's fine. But when you start to state opinions like the facts, well, what's your support? Because now your opinion becomes a position and you're asserting a position. So if I say, well, purple is the best. Okay, well, now I'm making an objective declaration. If I say, I like purple, that's my personal opinion. But if I'm expressing an opinion as though it is a factual statement, well, now it would be useful to have at least some support for it. A belief is also an idea. But a belief is an idea that has supporting references. Well, this is what I believe. I think this is true. Why do I think this is true? Here's the idea. Here's my points in support of this idea. That I have, legs supporting the table. And the more legs I have supporting the table, the more reference points I have, the more data points, the more observation, the more experience, the more factual information I have to back up the idea, the more logic I have to back up the idea, the more principles I have, and all as a backing up the idea, the stronger the belief should be. Now, related to beliefs is a conviction. Now, a lot of religious beliefs are convictions. And what we mean in this context is a conviction is a belief you no longer question. You don't challenge this belief. You don't question this belief. We should always be willing to question a belief, but it's okay if you don't do it unprompted. You don't have to sit around constantly challenging your own beliefs, constantly holding every belief you have loosely enough that, with every wind of information and people's thoughts, opinions, and feelings about it, you're going, oh my gosh, what if it's not true? It's okay to have convictions. It's okay to have things you don't question. What you need to be very careful of is having the kind of convictions you refuse to question. Even when it comes down to something as fundamental to Christianity as the existence of God. I tell people I'm open to the possibility there is no God if you have any evidence to support that. That I have a fairly high degree of certainty that there is a God. And if you have affirmative evidence to affirmatively show there is no God, I'm open to it. Now, sometimes people have, some pretty solid logic. And what they're really doing is they're attacking a particular God concept. Not the existence of God, but a particular theological concept of God. And here's one example is, does God always answer prayer by doing the thing that is prayed for? And is any miracle, large or small, you're just, an incidental thing to God? So if somebody, say has a very bad accident and something happens and say, I literally lose my legs, I physically lose my legs. Could God physically give me new legs? And, logically, yeah, he could. He creates the heavens and the earth. Of course, he could create new legs for me. And so the part of the logic is, so if you pray for new legs and your God can do new legs, if he's really there, you'll get new legs. Well, of course, there's a breakdown in that logic and the cause and effect universe and the economy of miracles and a whole bunch of other stuff that we teach here. And so for us, that doesn't challenge our God concept. But if someone believes God is a God who heals, God is a God of miracles, if you pray, God will do it. Well, if that's the theology, well, then that will prove that that theology is incorrect. It doesn't necessarily prove that there is no God. But now if you've tied that theology so much to who you believe God is, then if you take out that theology, and taking out that theology then breaks down the whole God concept, well then, yeah, that would prove that at least God conceptualized that way doesn't exist. It's not a challenge to us because that doesn't challenge how we see God, how we understand God, what we know about God. So we should always be open to examining a belief. We should always be open to folding in new facts as we discover them into our belief system. And see, is our belief system able to handle these facts? So as we understand that there is a potential variance between a fact and interpretation, it leads us to a principle of interpreting Scripture. And that is this. The Bible is the Word of God. Our interpretation of the Bible is not the Word of God. We treat the Bible as truth. We do. We treat the Bible as truth. That means that we believe the books in the Bible are the right books. We believe the words in the Bible are the right words. That to the extent we're able to determine the Greek and the Hebrew, that those are the right Greek words, those are the right Hebrew words. And we've got, 98, 99 point, something percent of the Bible, we know what the words are with a high degree of certainty. And for our purposes, we just assume it's all true. But what does it mean? The books are the right books, the words are the right words, but is it possible to look at the same words in the same books, in the totality of the Bible, and maybe not agree 100% on every single interpretation of those words. Very serious scholars, people who have mastered the Greek and the Hebrew as much as any scholar has, can study the scriptures, can study the Bible, can revere it as the Word of God, treating the words as the right and true words. And sometimes these scholars will arrive at various conclusions. And they do not all arrive at exactly the same conclusions on every single issue, even though they're using the same Bible. The first Christian college I went to, not the seminary I got my degree from, but I took some classes at a nearby, fairly conservative Christian school. That most of my Christian education comes from within the Baptist denomination. The first college I went to was a Baptist college. The seminary I went to was a Baptist seminary. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the bent. And so it's can be denominational. As the Baptist seminary will tend to draw some different conclusions than the charismatic seminary. The Baptist and charismatic seminaries are likely to draw different conclusions than the Catholic seminary. And so on and so on. But even at just the Baptist school, of the 4 professors that I had interaction with, on one particular issue that I was doing some work on, the 4 professors disagreed. All Baptists, all professors, all in the same Bible department, had differing conclusions on a fairly peripheral issue. That happens. What are they looking at? Same words, same Greek, same Hebrew, same books, same Bible, and even in the same denomination, at the same college, drawing differing conclusions on a peripheral issue. That happens. And so we understand that the Bible is the Word of God. The words are the right words. The words are the true words. But what exactly those words mean, what exact actions we should take on those words, might be subject to how we interpret those words, the meanings we ascribe, the applications we ascribe. And they could vary. Now let's look at truth. Aletheis through the lens of logosmai. So to think, to intentionally focus your conscious mind to look at and ponder. So take a look at the truth. Take a look at what you think might be true. Take a look at what you realize, okay, is a fact or an interpretation of those facts. But you think your interpretation might be true. And think about it. Focus your conscious mind. Look at it. Ponder it. Opinions, beliefs, convictions. Random ideas. Let's think about it. Reckon. Now this is an interesting one. I've applied this one kind of in some interesting ways sometimes in my own life. To reckon, to ascribe, to esteem, or to compute. Even if you don't know a truth, you can decide to reckon something as true. You may have no basis to know whether or not what you're going to reckon as true, what you're going to respond to as true, what you're going to behave as though it's true is actually true. No way to know. Now we do this all the time. So when we're driving and somebody cuts you off, oh, they're an idiot, what are they doing on the road? Get off the road, you idiot. Who gave you your license? And do people do that? Yes, what are they doing? They're ascribing a truth. They're deciding that someone cutting them off means all these things. When I get cut off, I assume, whoop, somebody didn't see me. I reckon that is true. And I just respond to the moment as though they didn't see me. I don't assume that they did it to me on purpose. I don't assume that they looked in their side mirror and say, oh, what? There's Scott. I'm going to cut him off. I don't assume that. I just assume they didn't see me. Now, whether they should have seen me or not, well, that's separate. I mean, of course they should have. But, sometimes I don't see people. When I cut people off, it's because I don't see them. I'm not maliciously, aggressively trying to drive someone off the road. Just every once in a while, I make a mistake. I figure, well, every once in a while, guess what's going to happen? Other people are going to make mistakes. I am reckoning something as true because I have no way to know. And so what I reckon as true is only going to determine my own emotion. I mean, am I going to crash into them on purpose if I think that they're being an idiot and back off if I think they just didn't see me? No, I'm going to back off either way. It's just, do I want to be upset about it or do I not want to be upset about it? How angry do I want to be? Well, I'd rather not be angry. So I will reckon as true that they didn't see me. Do I know that's true? No, I don't know that's true. Will I ever be able to know whether or not it's true? No, I'm not going to stop them, pull them over, give them a questionnaire, cross-examine them on a witness stand. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to know. I'm just going to go on about my day. And I ascribe a truth I have no way to know for no better reason than for my own emotional comfort. I don't want to be upset. There's enough things in life that are upsetting. Why create more? I mean, that's kind of my view on that. That there's enough things that are going to disrupt my life for me to create an interpretation to reckon as truth. I mean, it's only going to disrupt my life. It's not going to change anything. So I may as well be more chill. I'm reckoning something as true. And so that's one of those things where it might be helpful if you don't know. I don't know what they did. I don't know why they did it. All I know is I got cut off. And I won't know. I don't know, and I won't know. I'm not going to get in their head. I'm not even ever going to know who they are. So you can treat a thing as true. Now, there are sometimes, I've even done this in relationships, where I've told someone, like, well, to be honest, I'm not really sure I buy it. The evidence, the support for that is kind of ambiguous. But for purposes of interacting with you, I will treat it as though it is true. And you know, wait a second, why would you do that if you really don't know if it's true? Well, sometimes I know that people will lie for convenience sake. So if I'm at a store and something's late, and they tell me it's on back order, is it really on back order, or did somebody make a mistake and not place that order? Am I going to know? Am I ever going to know? Do I know? Will I know? I might be a little suspicious because, orders get missed. Is it really on back order? Am I going to investigate it? Or am I just going to treat it as true? Because ultimately, what's the reality of it? The reality of it is it's not here. The reality of it is, well, maybe it's coming later. Maybe somebody forgot. Maybe they're looking at they're trying to go, oh my gosh, we didn't order it. We totally forgot to order this thing. Okay. Well, we call that a back order around here. So, well, that's on back order. Hopefully it'll be here now next shipment. And the reality of it might be that it is on back order. The reality of it might be that someone forgot to order it. I don't know. I don't really need to know. It might be nice if I knew for sure one way or the other, because then I could solve the problem differently. But it is what it is. And they may not ever tell me. And so I can reckon something as true, even if I'm not really sure. They might have forgotten to place the order. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. So to reckon or to ascribe or to esteem or to compute a truth. To count your blessings, to count truths, to count true things, to count loving truths, to look at things and say, like, well, how much truth do I have in my life? How much do I have that's factual? How much do I have that's opinion? How much do I have that is interpretation of facts? How much do I have that is supported beliefs? How much do I have that's really just convictions? I just don't question it. And to count and value. Some truths may be more important than others. Some are bigger than others. Some are big truths. Some are small truths. Sometimes if you have potentially conflicting truths, you have multiple realities that might all be true, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to prioritize that? And here would be something where you have two people in your life who have differing opinions. Two people in your life that can be very passionate about their opinion. And you know if you put these people together, it's going to be a conflict. And you have the truth in one relationship, the truth in another relationship. You have the truth of who they are, the truth of who these people are. Do you put them together? Maybe yes, maybe no. And you have to decide, well, what's the more important truth here? Sometimes even in conflict with yourself, you go, what's the more important truth here? The more important truth here is we are partners, not opponents. Is this a conflict worth breaking our partnership over? Now, that doesn't mean it's going to end the relationship, but during this conflict, this might be a partnership-breaking conflict. That during the conflict, we are not acting as partners. We will be acting as opponents. Is that worth bringing in? Is there a higher, more important truth? Right now, it's political season. And it's neck and neck. It's pretty intense, and boy, are some people saying some nasty things. I try to just kind of stay out of it to whatever extent that I can, because boy, is it nasty. And frankly, I'm not willing to break partnership with a friend, to break partnership with a family member over politics. Is politics important? Yeah. Is my relationship with people more important to me than politics? Also, yeah. I'll vote the way I vote. They'll vote the way they vote. That's okay with me. But if all we're going to do is fight, I'm not going to change their mind. They're not going to change my mind. Why are we going to fight? What are we going to accomplish? The only thing we're going to accomplish is the fight. Damaging our relationship. So I think the higher truth here is that the relationship is a higher priority to me than this political conflict. I don't need to have this debate. That I don't see for me a purpose for me to engage in this debate because I don't believe I'm going to persuade this person. So I'm just going to drop it. I'm just not going to fight. And that's, some truths may be more important than others. That this relationship, the truth of this relationship, the love in this relationship, the pieces of this relationship, keeping this relationship intact is more important to me than what my true political beliefs are and what the other person's true political beliefs are. Now this is an interesting one. Suppose, assume a possibility. What if something might be true? Is it possible? Is it possible that it's true? How might you find out? And if so, what might it mean? So someone says something, your first reflex might be, well, it's kind of implausible. There's got to be a rational explanation for that, and that can't possibly be true. But what if it is? What if? Just suppose. Assume the possibility. And if it were true, is there a way you might know? If it's not true, is there a way you might know? Or is it one of those things where there is no way to know? And when you start to consider the implications, and this is one way to explore a possible truth, is to suppose, well, if that's true, what might that mean? For that, we move on to logic. So to reason through truth, to use logic. If this is true, what else, therefore, must be true? That in order for that to be true, is there anything else that must also be true in order for that to be true? What you might call conditions precedent. Things that there's no way for that to be true unless these things are also in place to result in that outcome. And then you also take a look at it. And if that is true, then logically, what else must also simultaneously be true? And or what else will later on be true? And you begin to look at the logic of it. What must have been true to get here? what must also be true in the here and the now, if that's true, and if those necessary things happen to get us to this point, what else must also be true? And logically, if that's true, what would then come of that? So what truths can you infer? What truths can you deduce from the facts that you know? From the facts, maybe you're just supposing, well, let's look at this logically. What if that is true? What else would that mean? What would logically be true if you suppose the truth? If you suppose that this is true. Now, sometimes that's a way to find out, say, okay, there's no way that can be true, because if that were true, then all these other things would also be true. Something that we've been running into right now, and hopefully this has been resolved historically if you're listening to this some years from now, and typical of political season, is there's almost a rebellion against the police. The police are the bad guys to a certain segment of the population now. Well, here's a basic logic thing. If the problem is police, what's the solution to police as a problem? No police. Problem solved. If the problem is police brutality, and that you recognize police brutality happens in a tiny percentage of cases, but police brutality is the problem, not the police, the brutality. Well, then what's the solution? No police brutality. So if the problem is police, then the question is, well, how do we get rid of the police? If the problem is police brutality, then how do we get rid of the police brutality? And if within that context there's also a problem is false accusations of police brutality, well, then how do we get rid of the false accusations? Not just assuming they're all false, and not assuming they're all true. How do we deal with that? And so how you define a problem logically is going to create your outcome. Now, when you're dealing with political issues, something I've noticed about political issues is that political issues tend to be defined in unsolvable ways. Now, logically, it may appear solvable, but for practical purposes, it will not be solved. Why would they do that? Why would they pick a fight they know they can't win? Well, they try to craft a fight with two objectives. One is they don't want to win. Two is they want the fight to inflame emotion. Now, why would some percentage, and it's not 100%, but some percentage of political battles be framed that way on purpose? Raises funds for organizations. People will donate money for fights that they feel passionate about, for objectives that they want to see more of. And it's never ending. And so you create a whole industry involved in this battle. And then it lasts, and it lasts, and it lasts, and the money keeps pouring in for something that ultimately is not solvable. Well, it's not the way they're going about it. So use your reason, use logic, whether something is true or you're supposing the truth, and by using that, well, we would apply as all principles must be consistently applied. So if this is true, what else must necessarily be true? What else would logically be true? If this really is what it is, and we're going to apply the principle as defined, what would the implications of that be? Is that really what we want to do? If not, we need to adjust the principle. So truth, number, to assign numbers, the total truth. What do you know? How do you know it? What are the facts? What are the important facts? What are the relevant facts? To compute, to determine by calculation, to calculate, to figure out, to determine, to evaluate. Some truths can be calculated. Some information can lead you to almost literally mathematical calculations, suppositions, charting stuff, graphing stuff, so that you can make some computations or calculations to figure stuff out. We can figure stuff out. There's a lot of logic to do that. Sometimes you can figure it out by computing stuff. Sometimes you can determine things, evaluate things, and say, okay, well, this is what they're telling me is true. How do they know? How would I be able to figure it out? How are they defining things? Ages ago, when I was involved in the sociological study on rape, one of the issues we were having was date rape. Now, when we first started talking about date rape, what date rape was, it was a regular rape that occurred incident to a date. Pretty self-explanatory, where the date was just a setup for where the rape took place. But then somehow, when still in the time I was involved in the social study of that, the meaning of it began to morph in the way it was being used in certain segments of the population, where it turned into, ultimately, at its most liberal end, of if there was sex incident to a date, and the next day the woman decides she shouldn't have done that last night, then that turned last night's sex into rape, because the next day she decided she shouldn't have done last night. And this was getting to be a problem, because then there's no way to prevent rape. When you start getting into that, then what starts happening, of course, in the backlash culture? Well, if all rape is she decides the next day. Well, no, that's not what we're talking about. But that was what some people were talking about. And from a criminal study and from a sociological study and trying to kind of deal with the issue in an effective way, that made it almost impossible. And what were they doing? When you went in and you evaluated it, basically they were pursuing an ideological agenda to expand the victim class and to expand who could be the victim and expand who was the bad guy without evaluating the impact of doing that. Sure, it served the rhetoric well, it served the debate well, it served the emotional inflaming of the discourse well, but it damaged the actual solving of the problem and how hard it was to get people to understand that. I was at a criminology conference making a presentation on the subject. And there was one particular woman in the audience, and she took issue with some stuff. And the rhetoric was just flying at me. And I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I connect with her in a practical way without just degenerating into a debate? And because, it was a panel, it was a Q&A time, and I was the speaker on this particular segment, and she was challenging me. And ultimately, what I got her to see is, like, look, we agree on some key objectives here. Using your definition, how is someone to know at the moment of intercourse whether it's rape or not? And the answer had to be, there's no way to know. You won't know for about a day. Well, in which case, how do you know if you should continue forward or not? How do you know if what you're doing is totally okay, 100% okay, or if what you are doing is a sex crime that could get you locked up for up to 7 years and a registered sex offender? How do you know? You don't. So what if we could create a different category for that? I don't know what that would be, but what if we create a different category for that that's separate? Because this is a criminology conference. We're talking about the crime aspect. We can't define a crime as to how someone else felt the next day. If I loan you my car and then tomorrow I decide I shouldn't have loaned you my car, you should not be arrested for grand theft auto. Now, from a social perspective, might we want to see what we can do to mitigate that? Maybe. But from a criminal perspective, can we deal with crime that way? No, we can't. And then ultimately, we had some agreement on that, and then that wasn't the only debate going on there. So in truth, alethees, to count over, to count again, to double check The double check on what is true, maybe to double check whether or not something's true. To deliberate, carefully weighed, studied, intentionally pursuing truth, intentionally distinguishing between fact and interpretation of facts, intentionally making the distinction between what's just an idea, an opinion with little or no support versus what's a belief, and then it has some points to support the belief, to what's a conviction, to recognize whether or not you ever question a particular belief, to recognize whether or not you're even open to having it challenged, to consider, to think about carefully, to reflect on, to make allowance for. When you know a truth, consider all the aspects and implications of that. And meditate on, closely related to, deeply contemplate many aspects of, to dwell upon. When you learn a truth, when you begin to realize, this really is true, let me think about this. Let me really spend some time with this, because if this is true, there's pretty significant implications. There's pretty significant ramifications of this. There's some adjustments I might need to make to something in the way I live my life. I might want to take a look at this at a whole different level, because this is important. Now, sometimes it could be just a very simple statement. As John Maxwell once said, it doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you can think of in time. Well, that seems a pretty simple, obvious thing. But at that particular moment in my life, that really struck me. Because, I'm one of those guys, like always, I know a lot of stuff. You know a lot of stuff. But have you ever known a lot of stuff, but in the moment, you just gotta think of it? And then, like, 2 a.m. Tuesday the following week, I know. Oh, if only I'd remembered that last week. Oh, I'm not the only one, right? Just checking. So you know a lot of stuff. It's in there. It just doesn't come out right when you wanted it to. You're sitting down for a test. For those of you who have test anxiety, and you go, name, I didn't study name. Hopefully none of us are that bad. I actually had a student who forgot her name. She was testing for about attention balance. Says, sir, my name is... And then she got this scared, like, oh my God, I forgot my name. What's my name? And her friends are like, Debbie, your name's Debbie. And what? Debbie! You can imagine how scared she was on that test. But sometimes when you're thinking about a truth, and then that simple statement, if it doesn't matter what you know, it matters what you can think of in time. Can you think of something when you need to think of something? Can you come up with it when you need to come up with it? And certainly in martial arts, that's the thing. How can we help people come up with the proper move, the proper technique, the proper application at that moment of stress when they need it? And so, it's something to consider, something to meditate on. You go, It was just one little sentence. I rewound it. There was a cassette tape back in those days. I rewound, I listened to it again, I rewound, I listened to it again. And it was just that simple statement, and I go, I had to really think about that. I had to think about how that applied in how many aspects of my life. So consider truth. Meditate on truth. Things that have larger implications in your life. A simpler thing for some people is, we are partners, not opponents. If you treat me like an opponent, you're telling me you don't want to be my partner. Is that really what you want to say? That I am going to be your opponent? If that's not what you want to say, then don't act like an opponent. That might be something to reflect on, to meditate on. Certainly for people who have relationships with me, of all the things I can be patient on, of all the things I have high degrees of tolerance for, I have a low degree of tolerance for people who expect to be treated like a partner, but want to behave like an opponent. Who expect all the perks of a particular relationship, but want to behave differently than that relationship would normally dictate that you behave. It's kind of like, if you want to use a much less emotional standard of that, it's like someone who says, I want to work here, I just don't want to have to show up for work. I want the paycheck, I just don't want to have to do the job. I mean, some of the job I like, I like to come when I like to come and leave when I want to leave, and I want to do the parts of the job I like, but I don't want to do the rest of the job, but I do want the paycheck. And as time goes on, as I've been doing the job long enough, well, I expect a raise. Well, in that kind of a job scenario, we'd recognize that's ridiculous. You don't do that. You're not doing the job. You're not showing up. You're going to get fired. And so you take out the emotion, you look at it something more objective like that, you say, well, obviously. But how much different are other relationships? I want you to treat me like I'm your friend, but I don't want to have to behave like I'm being a friend. But I want you to be a friend. I'm going to behave like I want to behave, but I expect you to behave like a girlfriend. But I'm going to behave like whatever I want to behave like. I'll show up as a boyfriend for the parts I like, but not for the parts I don't like. Husband, wife, mother, father, with your kids, whatever. And so think about stuff. Meditate on stuff. Ponder stuff. Consider the implications of stuff. Consider what you're modeling. Consider where things are going. I was just having a chat with kids and finding out that the children, 6 years old, they're aware of the election going on. They're aware of who's running for president. As young as 8 are aware of even the minor candidates. They're aware of the debate. They're aware of some of the arguments. They're aware of how toxic so much of it is. And you consider the implications. They're learning not just how we do politics. They're learning how to judge. They're learning how to express an opinion of how we're good and you're bad, you're wrong, you're evil. They're learning how to intentionally misinterpret. They're learning how to create an us versus them. They're learning how to attack and not listen. They're learning these things from our example as the adults. And I'm sitting on a mat with them for 10 minutes, trying to explain to them a different way. That's hardly going to undo months of exposure to a toxic election. To judge, to form an opinion, to draw a conclusion. So you start to look at your truths and look at your facts. Draw a conclusion and say, well, what's your interpretation of the facts? What's your opinion? What's your beliefs? How do you support that belief? What's your convictions? Draw a conclusion, form an opinion. To determine, to investigate, and decide. To settle, to cause, to affect. When it's important to know, you can investigate for yourself. Some things, not really important. Some things are important. Some things are worth at least entering it into a search engine to see if it's going to be true, if you're going to have like some passion behind your conviction. So, well, let's take a look at that. And very often, with stunning regularity, when someone has a passionate opinion on something extreme, it sounds kind of strange. Well, let's just look it up. I mean, there's no sense in us having a debate. Just give me a link. Let's go, look it up ourselves. Instead of arguing over who said what, well, it's a public figure. There's video, there's audio. Let's go look it up. Let's play the video. See what actually got said. And with some regularity, that ends the argument, or at least it changes the argument, because now we're not going on, well, you heard someone's opinion on what someone said, and what they say someone said. Well, it's a public video. Let's go and look and see what it actually says, and then we can discuss it from there. So when it's important to know, you can investigate for yourself. You can go check your references and say, okay, well, who's saying this? Where is this information coming from? How do they know? And then finally, to decide. To decide is to cut off other options. To decide is to conclude. To decide is to choose. When you've learned a key truth, and you've learned it, you understand it, you believe you have the implications of it, you see what it should change in your life, then you can stop questioning that truth. Stop pretending you haven't found out the answer yet, and take action on what you found out. Stop arguing for something you found out isn't true. Adjust your life around the new truths that you learn. Adjust your life around the implications of the larger truths. Especially if you find you've been kind of caught up in the minutiae. That you're caught up arguing like whether something happened at 2 o'clock or something happened at 4 o'clock. You're caught up in whether something was in 2012 or 2011. And you're breaking relationship of this higher level truth. I want to have this relationship, but I keep attacking in all these piddly little things. And decide, I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to bring it up here. Just let the little stuff go. Oh, but the truth is at stake. Well, maybe. At the sacrifice of maybe something higher than that level of truth. But whatever it is for you, whatever truth you're learning, whatever insight you're gaining, whatever principles you're discovering for yourself, when it is something that ought to affect your life, make a choice. Decide at some time. I'm going to do this. I'm going to live this out. I'm going to take action on it. I'm going to walk forward with this in my life. Think on these things. Whatsoever things are true. Whatsoever things are honest. Whatsoever things are just. Whatsoever things are pure. Whatsoever things are lovely. Whatsoever things are of good report. Where there be any virtue. Where there be any praise. Think on these things. Of course, next time we're going to delve into honesty. Truth and honesty, of course, are very closely linked. So if you feel like we haven't gotten to everything yet, well, it's because we haven't gotten to everything yet. And of course, you can tell we're going through this very slowly, doing a bit of a deep dive and to think on these things because of the importance of really thinking, really logizomai, really thinking, unpacking, true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, virtue, and praise, as we think on these things. Thank you.